So often we're looking at our lives, everything that's happening through just our own perspective. So if somebody's acting a certain way, or toxicity, or something that is hurting our pride or ego, we don't often think about what they might be going through. Maybe we need to show them compassion rather than us feeling that we always need to have that toward us, toward what we're going through and make us feel better. Sometimes we need to make the other person feel better. In this Torah portion of Vayeshev, I call it the three-sided story. And we learn about Yaakov not having this tranquility at the time that he wanted. And I remember Rashi saying something like, is it not good enough that you have everything in the world to come that you also wanted in this time? But really, his tranquility was broken when Yosef was actually speaking about his brothers and sort of tattletaling. And the karma of this actually came really quickly because he shared how his brothers were eating flesh cut off from a living animal, which you can't do. And his brothers sold him, cutting him off from the family. And then he told his father how the brothers treated the sons of the handmaidens with contempt and called them slaves. And then Yosef, as you know, was sold as a slave. Because he shared with his father that his brothers were acting immorally, Yosef's master's wife cast her eyes upon him, and he landed in prison in Egypt for 2 years. So we see this sort of karma happening so quickly. But what Yosef tells his brothers later, instead of exacting revenge, he says that it's all for the good, and that this descent was for the ultimate ascent. We know that he was placed there, and he was able to save his family because the famine that was coming, he also saved the entire world. So he knew that all of these things that are happening on the journey are for his ultimate good, all the divine decrees to a freer me. He knew that these are all part of the purpose of his purpose and of the purpose of the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, and the ultimate redemption. This idea of Maaseh Avot, Siman Labanim, of Abraham going down to Egypt, but acquiring greater wealth and then going to Israel, and the same with Bnei Israel into Egypt as well, and then finally reaching the promised land. So it's this idea that we're also in this constricted consciousness, this Egypt, fear, anxiety, all these things that disconnect and that oppose godliness, but it's our ultimate purpose and point is to have that descent, but have that for the ascent. Reach the promised land at all times. Go from Yaakov, the Ekev, as Drake said, started from the bottom, now we're here. So we start at the bottom, we have this descent, but it's always within mind to go from Yaakov, when he gets renamed Israel, the redemptive consciousness, we have to go in that same way. Any of the nitzotzot, the things that fall into the darkness, the klipa, but raise them back and align them back with purpose as creations to the Creator so that we can reach this redemptive consciousness. How is this done? For us, we have to avoid any negative speech. There, it did have an ultimate purpose, but for us in general, we need to avoid that because words create world. So when we're saying something bad about another person, we don't know the damaging effects of that. And there's this story with the Baal Shem Tov, this one rabbi who lost his business because there was another person in town. He just loved telling these stories. He was a storyteller. He didn't intend to speak negatively in that fashion, but sometimes that's what happens. And he would say all these things. And in this one case, it actually took this person from being this amazing, upstanding person in the community and took out his whole business. The rumor just kept spreading and growing and nobody would go there anymore and he lost his business. So he went to the Baal Shem Tov and he told him, and the Baal Shem Tov said, bring this person who tells the stories, I'm going to talk to him. So this person comes to the Baal Shem Tov and the Baal Shem Tov tells him, the effect and the damage that this had caused, and he was so sorry and he wanted to know how to rectify it. And he told him, go and get a pillow and come back. And he said, okay, that's easy enough, but how is that going to solve that? I don't understand, but okay, fine, I'll go. So he goes and gets the pillow, brings it back, and the Baal Shem Tov says, okay, take this knife and rip the pillow and spread the feathers out. The window was open, so it went on everything, on the furniture, on himself, on the Baal Shem Tov, went out the window, flew everywhere. He was pretty embarrassed and kind of confused as to what's happening. And the Baal Shem Tov said, okay, now take the pillowcase and put all the feathers back into the pillowcase. And he said, well, I can't do that. I mean, I could probably get some of the feathers that are in this room with us, but I won't be able to get the other feathers. And the Baal Shem Tov said, that's exactly what happens when you speak negatively and it spreads. You can't fix that. You can't mitaken that. But what you can do is you can profusely apologize to the person, and you can do the same and correct it with everybody who you spoke with. So we don't realize the ramifications and the damage that this does, and we can't actually fix it to the extent that we need to. So the idea is we have to avoid it at all costs. We don't want to bring this negative and put this person in this negative space because it also puts us in this negative space as mirroring each other. So my blessing is that we can only speak good and judge favorably and bring the redemptive consciousness, Israel, to the promised land and reach this promised land at all times. Shabbat Shalom. Love you guys.